Tanse, I'm Krisanachkite. Welcome to APTN National News. The Aamjiwnaang First Nation near Sarnia, Ontario is ordering some of its residents to evacuate while the INEOS Styrolution company removes benzene from its facility. Benzene is a toxic chemical known to cause cancer. It's feared the cleanup could release more of the chemical into the air. About 100 band members are being sent to nearby hotels until it's safe to go back home. The highest levels of benzene are expected to be in the air between October 2nd and October 6th. Last April, high levels of benzene were registered in the air. The First Nation declared a state of emergency after people became ill with dizziness, nausea, and headaches. The Ontario government pulled the company's environmental compliance license in May, and the company announced it would be shutting down permanently. Benzene is used in electronics, medical appliances, and auto parts. About 900 people live in Aamjiwnaang First Nation. When the national event for Truth and Reconciliation wrapped up in Ottawa on Monday, many survivors began heading home. But as APTN's Annette Francis tells us, members of the Survivors Secretariat stayed a little longer to hold a small rally. It followed a new report released earlier the same day, which represents survivors from the Mohawk Institute.
Late Monday afternoon, a small group from Six Nations gathered on Parliament Hill near the Eternal Flame. Secretariat lead Laura Arndt wasted no time asking for support.
Tell your MPs, tell your communities that we've had enough. Indian residential school survivors have been fighting for their lifetime. They shouldn't have to be fighting this late in the game to have the truth told.
According to Arndt, this year's federal budget reduced funding so that there is no long-term support for the search for unmarked graves. They're seeking long-term funding for investigations into the missing children and unmarked graves. APTN News asked Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Gary Anna-Desangri about Arndt's comments. He said the federal government reinstalled a funding cap back up to $3 million after it had been reduced to $500,000 earlier this year.
Having heard from many survivor groups, I instructed our department to lift the cap and essentially come back to the old numbers.
However, in a press conference earlier the same day, Arndt called the minister's words a shell game. She insisted funding has dropped from over $216 million for community agreements to $91 million over the next 2 years, saying long-term funding is lacking.
How do you go from $216.5 million to 91 and say it's not a cut? And while people will say it was never a line item promise, what we would say is if this wasn't going to continue, why did you wait until 9 months into the funding year to tell people that the funding level was being reduced?
Chloe Stevens says having to continue fighting the federal government is appalling.
I think it's tragic. I think that that's not what we need right now, and I think we're going through a lot of struggles where people have went through a lot of pain, our survivors and our elders, that, you know, we need this to heal, and taking it away and just limiting the resources is awful. There's still a long road ahead, you know, and it's not just for the publicity, it's for people's hearts to heal.
Alison Seymour came from Akwesasne to show her support. She says youth need to stand up for the survivors.
As young people, need to act because time, as they say, heals most wounds. It's not going to heal this wound. The elders don't have much time left, and it's crucial to bring back the children who unfortunately did not come back from residential schools.
Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Now to Vancouver, where numerous events were held to honor the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. APTN's Tina House has the story.
Close to 1,000 people gathered at Grandview Park in East Vancouver to honor survivors of residential schools and to remember those that didn't come home. Many here are intergenerational survivors that also suffered through traumas of the past, but today is meant to help heal those wounds and celebrate the strength and resiliency of Indigenous people and the next generation coming. Susanna Maya organized the event and proudly dances with her nation to honor this day.
I just want to say, with great gratitude and respect, I thank our ancestors, our survivors, and those who didn't make it home for, their strength. And, my mother, she's a residential school survivor. I'm from the Guasala and Naquataw Nation, and I thank my ancestors for getting me here and all of us here.
Wanda Christensen is from Bella Bella, BC. She spent 9 years in the Alberni residential school.
I'm one of many survivors who does not remember their existence in residential school. I was so young when taken away at the age of 6 going on 7. It may be hard for some to understand, but growing up, I had no idea about who I was or where I came from. My life was regimented by the supervisors and the ring of a bell at the beginning, throughout, and the ending of each day. The supervisors were my caretakers, therefore I dissociated due to the sexual abuse by a supervisor.
For Gary Peterson, who is from Alert Bay, BC, he says it's time now for the truth to come out for survivors like Wanda.
The rest of the country and the world is finally seeing and hearing our story that needs to be heard, that is a part of Canadian history. And we're not a part of Canada's history. Canada is part of our history. We've been here for thousands of years, living in harmony with the land. But the songs and dances go back thousands of years, and my culture is what made me who I am to this day.
I thank all the allies and the support in the community for being here on such a day that, resonates with so many of us as intergenerational survivors as well. And I thank all the people across the nation who are supporting Truth and Reconciliation Day as well.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Thank you, Tina. Now to Gatineau, Quebec, where a special unveiling took place at the Museum of History just last Monday. The ceremony marked the installation of an 18-foot residential school memorial monument. Once again, here's APTN's Annette Francis, who got a sneak peek of the work last week and sat down to talk with the artist.
This monument is a work of master carver Stanley Hunt.
I wanted people to be able to come and be able to physically touch the monument, physically hold it and feel it, and feel that what it's meant to do is feel the spirits of our children.
It's a dedication to all the children who didn't make it home from residential schools. The inspiration came while working with friend and fellow carver Ray Dickey, after they heard the news of the 215 unmarked graves found at the former Kamloops Indian residential school.
After talking, Ray just said, could we do something for the children? He was asking me as an artist, could I think of something, like, how do you honor something like what happened? So I had lots of time to think about it, and I said, yes, I can. But, it's going to take a year or so.
It did take a year, and this is the design he came up with.
So in our culture, the creator is the raven. And he's also the trickster. But if you look closely at this raven, he's cradling the seed of life in his mouth, in his beak. And the way he's looking at this monument, he's looking straight down the center of the monument. And what we see upside down, the raven sees it right side up. And he's going to help us understand this and help us find these children and help them bring their spirits home, is what I'm hoping happens. It's painted black, white, it's blackwashed because of the dark history that it's marking. There were some very bad decisions made back then. But then it's painted orange for our Every Child Matters movement that's happening.
After carefully being loaded onto a truck, Hunt says it took 2 months to bring the memorial from Prince Rupert to Gatineau. When he saw it standing for the first time, he was emotional.
I'm really honored for them to have taken it this far and give it this beautiful space that we're in. And, you know, it starts its work after Monday, when the public's going to be able to come in and see it.
The inauguration was Monday evening on National Truth and Reconciliation Day. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Gatineau, Quebec.
Thank you, Annette. Powerful story. We now want to tell you about this week's new web poll question. We're asking, did you take part in events for National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th? You can answer yes or no. Have your say at www.aptnnews.ca. The Muscowgan First Nation in Saskatchewan has partnered with Parks Canada for a recent project. We'll tell you more when we come back in about 3 minutes. Stick around. Welcome back. The Muscowgan First Nation in Saskatchewan is bringing more awareness about the legacy of residential schools through a new video from Parks Canada.
It represents the history of those students that went through there.
The federally funded Muscowgan Indian Residential School was in operation for 111 years from 1886 to 1997. After it shut down, more than 300 elders, survivors, and community members voted to keep the building standing. And today, the First Nation offers educational tours to people from across the country and the world. The school was designated a National Historic Site in 2021. The First Nation has been working towards converting the school into a national museum. The short documentary titled Truth Awakens Our Spirit includes interviews with Vanessa Wolf and residential school survivor Andrew Nick Hunter.
I would like to see this place restored and put into a museum so our children would understand down the road the lives we went through.
Truth Awakens Our Spirit is available on YouTube in 3 different languages, including Soto's Muscowgan's original language. Next year will mark 50 years since the Portage La Prairie Residential School in southern Manitoba closed its doors. Now, as the home of the National Indigenous Residential School Museum, it's been transformed from a place of hurt to a place of healing. Reporter Sierra Bettens took a tour of the museum with Executive Director and residential school survivor Lorraine Daniels.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Daniels. I'm the Executive Director of the National Residential School Museum of Canada. We are located on the Kishkimakwa urban site of Long Plain First Nation. It was called the Portage La Prairie Indian Residential School, and now it's a place where we can come and heal. It operated from 1915 to 1975, and next year it will be 50 years since it closed. The vision of having a museum was through the visionaries of Ernie Daniels. He was a former chief, and former chief Dennis Meaches. In the early 2000s, the vision was incorporated, and they had a BCR designating this as a historic site of significance. So in 2020, it became a National Historic Site. I was 7 years old when I went to Brandon, my first residential school, and I was just learning about the medicines when I got taken away. I'm still learning about the culture that I lost, and being in this position as a director is helping me and teaching me about the culture. First get into the residential school. You're stripped of your clothes, your identity as an Indigenous child. They deloused us with DDT, which is a banned pesticide. I remember how chalky and gritty it was. Some of them had numbers. Some of the schools, we just had initials. On a Sunday, I had to get up at 6 in the morning for early morning church, and then the regular church at noon. And then you would have the benediction in the evening. So this picture is about how the kids were abused severely, mentally, emotionally, physically, and just constantly such harsh discipline that they could not enjoy being children. This is an actual bed that came from Bertle. So everybody shared dorm, there was no privacy. These are replicas of straps. So there's different sizes of straps for different age groups. So, you know, the trauma of touch, you know, you lost your language, your culture, your indigenous spirituality, and your loss of your family unit. This is to honor the resident school survivors that were part of the singing glee club here. I didn't go to this school, but I was already placed in a private home. And I came here, I auditioned for the glee club because I wanted to go to Japan. So I was able to get in on the glee club. So there was 30 of us that went to Japan, and so if you look at the picture there, that's the group that went. That's me here with the little braids, the long braids. When we heard about the 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops, we had a little ceremony to honor them. So there's 215 feathers, and the jingles represent healing. The orange represents all the survivors, and the blue represents the children that never came home. So that's the wreath to honor the children. It's a difficult truth to tell, but on Reconciliation Day, that's when we all come together and work together. The barriers are down. I really wanted to make it a family event because at one time we were not allowed to be children. Now it's open. We can do whatever we want on this ground because Long Plain owns the building, and it's our choice of how we want to celebrate life now.
Thank you, Sarah. The world premiere of Angela's Shadows is making its big debut at the Vancouver International Film Festival today. We'll speak with the filmmaker next in less than 3 minutes. Stay with us. Starting on the East Coast, St. John's 9, Charlottetown 15. Cartwright 9, the Grand River 13. Val-d'Or 9, Gaspé 13. Toronto 15, Ottawa 14. 24 in Timmins, Sioux Lookout 12. Puckatawagan 4, God's Lake 7. Dauphin 11, Brandon 9. Swift Current 6, Yorkton 8. Meadow Lake 3, La Ronge, Sunny and 2. +6 in Fort Chipewyan, Peace River 9. 16 in Medicine Hat, Calgary 12. Tofino 14, Penticton 20. Sandspit 16, Smithers 11. Watson Lake 4, Mayo 7. Yellowknife 3, Wrigley 6. Inuvik 0, Sax Harbor -1. 5 in Chesterfield, Baker Lake 2. And Arctic Bay 6, and Igloolik 4. Cree filmmaker Jules Kostashian is back with a new feature film, and it's set to have its world premiere on October 2nd at the Vancouver International Film Festival. Angela's Shadow is a dramatic thriller that takes place in the 1930s when residential schools are in full swing and ceremonies have been outlawed. For more on the film, here's Jules Kostashian, who recently spoke to us while on the road. Jules, I briefly described your new feature-length film, but can you tell us about Angela's Shadows?
Angela's Shadow is a film that is based loosely on a first attempt to a novel that I wrote, and it's also part of a trilogy. It's a story about a young woman who's pregnant, who travels back up to her Cree community, but she is haunted by her dead twin.
Interesting.
That's
not giving too much away, hey? Like many of your films, this one draws on your own personal experiences. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, this one in particular is kind of steered a little bit further away from my own lived experience, but it is about intergenerational trauma and healing. It takes place in 1935. But I've always been taught that Indigenous women are the strength and the backbone of our community. And within this film, there is the story of the matriarchs that are sustaining culture. So I thought that was very important to highlight because of my aunties and my kukum.
Yeah.
And it is a story that I think is still relevant today, even though it takes place in 1930s. It's a story about resiliency.
Very interesting. The film just secured a Canadian distribution and international sales deal. What will that mean in terms of who will get to see the film?
I'm hoping, first and foremost, I always have an Indigenous audience in mind. That's who I create film for. So I'm hoping it has a far reach internationally to Indigenous community globally. But also across Turtle Island as well. I'm hoping that we get on some of the big streamers so that people can access it. And also a theatrical release would be really nice near and around Indigenous community. Well, all of this is Indigenous community anyway, but you know what I mean, the urban centers. So I'm hoping that we have a far reach, and I'm really excited about signing on with Motion 58.
Hoping we get a theater show here in Winnipeg as well. We call this Nietzsche Central here in Winnipeg, so fingers crossed for that. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is fresh on many minds, and a lot of your films touch on the impacts of residential school system. And as the intergenerational survivor, what does September 30th mean to you?
I think, for me, it's about us kind of maybe relieving ourselves of that weight of trauma, figuring out who we are without our parents' trauma. And it's also about, I think, for settlers to take accountability for their own action in terms of learning about what happened, because it is really their system that has impacted our community. So I think for me, reconciliation is really about action. And what does that mean? It means that maybe there needs to be some more curriculum change within the educational system. Settler Canadians have to do more work and not rely on us for that emotional labor to explain how that system of oppression has impacted us. But I also think it's an opportunity for discussion and maybe some uncomfortable dialogue, which I think is necessary because that's how things change. But I think it's every day, as Indigenous people, truth and reconciliation is every day. We have to live with it, right? So, yeah.
And really quickly and briefly, where can people watch the film when it's out?
Well, Angela's Shadow right now. Sorry, I don't know what that is outside. I'm in Arizona at a film festival. Sounds like there's a thunderstorm. Angela's Shadow is available or will be available. That is a very good question. I'm not quite sure yet with the new distribution company, but I believe that we're going to have a theatrical release, and then they will have some way for people to access the film through the streamers and so forth.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jules. We really appreciate your time, and we'll definitely keep an eye out for that film.
Thank you. I think you'll enjoy it.
And that's your midday newscast for this Wednesday, October 2nd. We'll be back again in a few hours for your evening newscast with more news stories. Make sure to join us then. From everyone at APTN National News, Masicho, hi, miigwech. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next day.